your simplest procedure is going to be a couple parts. So you're going to, you're going to sanitize all the equipment you're going to use and clean it. You're not that concerned with the stuff you're going to use when you're actually cooking the wort. It's going to be boiled, so essentially you get together your malt extract or your grains if you do all grain brewing. We'll stick with something simple though, so you can use malt extract. If you want, you can have specialty grains, so just a pound or two of something that's going to add color, possibly a little bit of flavor. And then you're going to add in your malt extract, which is going to be the basis of your wort. Is going to be what provides the base color, the specific gravity, like how thick the beer is, and also it'll affect the head on the beer. And everything is going to affect everything else in different ways. But you're also going to have a bittering hops, which you're going to add in. And anyway, I have an audience now. So the bittering hops is just going to be the length of the boil, and it's essentially going to add it's going to change your pH level of your beer, make it more acidic, and it's going to add the bitter flavor that most people associate with beers. So the different types of hops, how long you have them in the boil for, and how much obviously is going to affect the beer. But start to finish, you're going to add all your ingredients at the beginning of the boil, right? You're going to heat the water. If you have grains, specialty grains, you put them in first. Steep them, usually somewhere between 140 and 165 degrees for however long you want, really, anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. Most people do about 30 minutes. Then you're going to do a boil. Once you take the grains out, you add all your dry malt extract, add all your hops. Then you do a boil, usually about 60 minutes. It can be longer depending on what type of beer you're making and on what your ingredient list is. And then once you hit certain steps in your boil, you might add more ingredients. Usually 15 minutes before the end of the boil, you'll add your wort chiller or any sort of refining agent. If you do any sort of additives, they'll usually go in about that point. Irish moss, yes, for clarity. You can also put in extra hops anytime during the boil. The later you put them in during the boil, the more flavor and aroma they give, whereas they're just mainly for bittering purposes early on. But once your boil is done, you're going to cool off the wort as quickly as possible. Easiest way is with a wort chiller, basically just copper tubing that runs cold water through. If you don't have that, you can do what's called an ice bath method. Just take a sink, fill it up with ice water, dunk your bucket inside it. And that's going to also cool it down. You probably have to keep adding ice, swirl it around a little bit. You play with it, figure out what works best for you. But I've used both methods. They both work equally well. I prefer wort chiller, but ice bath method works too. After you do that, you have to make sure your wort gets down below 80 degrees. The reason 80 degrees is the cutoff is because as far as I know, there's not a yeast that will start fermenting above 80 degrees. Once you hit below 80 degrees, you need to aerate the wort. So you are ready to put it into your primary fermenter. Usually it's a plastic bucket, 6 gallons or so. And the reason, your ideal batch size is 5 gallons. The reason you do a 6-gallon bucket is to allow yourself room. As the wort ferments, it's going to bubble up, foamy basically at the top. And you want to leave a little gap there so it doesn't come bubbling out the top, which creates a bit of a mess if it has happened to anyone.
Yeah.
Not saying that from experience.
And then we took a shortcut. We took the hydrometer test by clearing out some of the foam.
Yes. So the hydrometer, you can do it 2 different ways. You can take it through a sample jar, like this one here, or you can put the hydrometer directly into the wort itself. And all it's going to do is it's going to give you your original gravity or your starting gravity, which you use later to calculate the alcohol percentage. Once you've done that, you're ready to pitch your yeast. So depending on the type of yeast, you just follow the directions on the package. Some of them you have to warm up before you pitch them. Some of them you have to put into a cup of water and let them sit for an hour or 2. Some of them you just take straight out of the package and dump it in your wort. But you follow the directions, whatever it says. Put the yeast in the wort. Now you're ready to cap the bucket. You put your airlock on top, which will allow, as it ferments, the wort's going to produce gas. So the airlock will allow it to bubble out, but not allow any outside air in. And that's important because during the whole procedure, you want to make sure you maintain your everything sanitized. Because even the tiniest bit of bacteria stands a chance of contaminating your beer, if you will. It'll make it skunky, add stringent taste to it, like very harsh flavors. So not always. Sometimes the yeast will actually override the bacteria, but if it's a weak yeast strain or something like that, or a very strong bacteria, it can overcome what's in the beer. So you always want to be careful. You always want to sanitize everything. Anyway, so now your beer's in the primary fermenter. It's at room temperature. You want to make sure you reach whatever temperature your yeast is supposed to be fermenting at. Most yeast, it's going to be 65 to 75 degrees, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then, say after a week or two, you want to transfer it to a secondary fermenter, and that will allow it to, basically, the yeast sediment will fall out, and you want to get away from that sediment because the longer you're in that sediment, the more of a sulfur odor, the harsher the flavors become. You get kind of that itchy feeling in the back of your throat as you drink it. That means you kept it in that primary fermenter too long. So usually about a week is good enough. You can do it longer, it's just personal preference, but I usually do a week. So now that you're in your secondary fermenter, it's another opportunity to add other ingredients, extra hops for aroma. If you want to add, say vanilla bean or cloves or something to a wheat beer, that's a great time to add them. And then as long as it sits in the secondary fermenter, that's totally up to you, because by that point, the fermentation process is more or less complete. You're just looking to condition the beer. You're trying to allow all the different ingredients, all the different flavors to mesh together and blend so that they make a more cohesive beer. Some beers are ready straight out of the primary fermenter. Some beers need to be conditioned for as much as 3 or 4 months. It's all personal preference, how much time you're willing to put into the beer. If you're anxious to try the batch, But anyway, that's pretty much start to finish. Other than that, once you're done in the secondary, you can either bottle or keg your beer. Both methods are very easy. Bottling is more convenient after you're done bottling. It's easy to give a guy, hey, here's a 6-pack, or hey, let's crack open one beer. Whereas kegging, you got to make sure that you always have the CO2 handy. You've got to make sure that, if you're trying to go somewhere else, you take the whole kit with you with the regulator and everything. So kegging's easier to actually get done and be ready to try the beer then and there. Bottling is more convenient in the long run. Personal preference as well. Bottling's probably cheaper, but it's, once again, time constraints, personal preference, what you're trying to use your beer for. That's what makes the difference. Other than that, the biggest key is to make sure that you enjoy the beer. And even if you come out with a bad batch every now and then, no big deal. Either you have old batches to rely on, or hey, look forward to the next batch you make. So other than that, that's all I got.
Bottoms up.
Bottoms up.